You're gliding into a hot LZ at 70 miles an hour, no engine, no parachute, no go-around. Just you, a fabric-covered box of wooden ribs and steel tubes, and every prayer you've ever memorized. If World War II aviation had a haunted house ride, this was it, the Waco CG-4A. A machine so strange, so gutsy, and so brutally simple, the pilots joked the G on their wing stood for guts, mostly because they couldn't print what it really stood for. I'm Bill, and this is Buffalo Air Park. Let's dive in. Have you ever thought about the World War II heroes who flew headfirst into combat without an engine? Forget the Mustangs and the Spitfires for just a second. I want to introduce you to the silent workhorse of chaos, the Waco CG-4A glider. The British, being the British, called it the Hadrian, which sounds fancy enough to distract you from the fact that this thing looked like a giant wooden shoe with wings. The U.S. Army Air Forces considered it their go-to airborne delivery truck. Pilots called it, well, they didn't call it much unless they wanted to jinx themselves, because these glider pilots, they were a different breed. Tough, independent, and absolutely convinced the G on their silver wing stood for guts. And honestly, it did. They were the only aviators in the war who flew into combat with no power, no parachutes, no second chances. Every landing was either a beautifully controlled crash or a less beautifully controlled crash. The glider built from the pantry aisle. Now here's where things get weird, and this is where your eyebrows will try to escape your forehead. The glider program had two bizarre rules. No aluminum allowed. No powered aircraft companies could build them. So who built America's wartime assault glider? Oh, you know, the usual crowd. Steinway Piano, Anheuser-Busch, J.H. Heinz. Yes, the ketchup people helped build one of the most important aircraft of World War II. Somewhere out there exists a timeline where a glider pilot mutters, "I survived thanks to a beer company and the pickle guys." Ford Motor Company cranked out more CG-4As than anyone, over 4,000 of them. But by the end of the war, more than 100 companies had helped build nearly 14,000 gliders. Each CG-4A had over 70,000 individual parts, yet was so brilliantly simple that it could haul more than its own weight. 13 fully equipped troops, a 57mm anti-tank gun, a 75mm howitzer, or the crowd favorite, a Jeep. And that nose? That hinged-up, flip-top cockpit door from aviation's wildest dreams? It created a 5-by-6-foot opening so cargo could drive straight out. Designers even added automatic safety cables, so if cargo ripped loose during landing, the nose would pop upward, lifting the pilots and keeping them from being crushed by their own truck. A thoughtful feature for an aircraft that otherwise had the bedside manner of a runaway shopping cart. So, how do you train someone to fly a crash delivery machine? Well, you don't just shove them out the back of a C-47 and hope they figure it out. America started its glider program with only 25 experienced civilian instructors. That's it, 25 people to train an army. So they improvised. Some training bases rolled out giant wind machines, basically industrial-strength fans mounted on Jeep frames that created an artificial storm. Students sat in a tethered training glider suspended in the airflow, learning to hold altitude and control the glider while it bucked around like it wanted to escape. And the wind machines, they were fun too. Let's take a minute and talk about the gauges used in the CG-4A. They were taken straight off powered airplanes, meaning no engine vibrations, meaning the needle stuck, meaning you had to physically tap your altimeter to see if you were still airborne, or just moments from becoming modern art. Imagine flying into Normandy, flak exploding around you, and you're tapping your altimeter like you're trying to fix an old TV. Great. The CG-4A's wildest missions. Gliders saw brutal action: Sicily, D-Day, Market Garden, the Rhine crossing, but their small size made them surprisingly versatile. In the China-Burma India theater, CG-4s were used for the famous British Indian Chindit missions. They carried troops, supplies, ammo, even mules. In 1944, gliders brought bulldozers and engineers into the jungle to build an airstrip overnight. Before the Japanese even finished their evening tea, an entire landing zone appeared in the middle of the forest. And then there was the snatch technique, a system so wild it sounds like something out of Looney Tunes. A C-47 would fly low, dragging a hook. Two poles held a nylon loop upright. If the hook caught the loop, wham! The glider was yanked off the ground like a trout on a fishing line. This was used in Burma to evacuate 700 to 800 wounded Chindits without losing a single glider or tow plane. Later, near Remagen, the same technique rescued soldiers from both sides. The craziest one of all, the Transatlantic glider. And now the grand finale, the strangest thing ever attempted with a CG-4A. A single glider named Voodoo was towed across the Atlantic in 1943. Two pilots, wing commanders Richard Dickey Sayes and Fowler Gobel, had already broken the world distance record flying a glider from Montreal to the Bahamas, so naturally the next step was, let's tow this thing to Scotland. They overloaded it with 3,360 pounds of cargo, including blood plasma for the Soviets. The trip, 3 major winter storms, ice forming inside the cockpit, fog so thick it felt physical, turbulence that tried to fold the glider in half. And then, just as Scotland came into view, barrage balloons, steel cables designed to decapitate airplanes. Somehow, just somehow, they made it. 3,500 miles, 28 hours, first glider crossing of the Atlantic. The mission was declared impractical, and the idea never used again. And, in the final twist of fate, when Voodoo was being flown to a museum, it crashed and was too damaged to restore. A weird, tragic ending for one of World War II's strangest overachievers. And that wraps up another tale from aviation's stranger side. Until next time, keep your eyes on the skies.